which is the most haunting deathbed confession you know of. One of my uncles confessed to having 2 other children with another woman. He thought he was going to pass from the virus, and I guess he felt he needed to come clean. He didn't pass. That was back in 2020, and there's still a ridiculous amount of drama happening over potential inheritances. And whatnot, glad he's alive, but it's hysterical he got a second chance to live after admitting to having a second family. Note to self, make sure you're actually on your deathbed before making a deathbed confession too. There was a couple where the wife had got some sort of mental illness where she wouldn't go outside of the house. This went on for years. Eventually, after counseling, she made a little progress and agreed to go to the pharmacy. One night she went in while her husband stayed in the car. While she was in the pharmacy, someone walked in, popped her in the back of the head, and walked out. Passed immediately, and the shooter was never caught. For years, everyone thought it was some insane paranormal thing. She somehow knew that being out in public would lead to her demise, etc. Many decades later, the husband admitted on his deathbed that he had hired someone to take her out because he couldn't take her condition anymore. 3. My great-great-uncle admitted on his deathbed that he wasn't actually related to our family. He'd spent the last 40 years in the U.S. using one of our distant relatives' citizenship papers since they looked similar enough, and in the 1920s, that was really all you needed. He didn't take out the real uncle or anything. The guy had just decided America wasn't for him and went home. This dude was like, hey, since you don't want to go back, can I have your papers? And that was that. 4. My stepfather requested to see the 2 other families he had that nobody knew about on his deathbed. Boy, was that fun. The guy really knew how to juggle 5. My grandpa whispered something cryptic right before he passed. He said the garden gnome, it was always him, and then just closed his eyes forever. It's been 10 years and I still get chills thinking about it. I mean, what garden gnome, why him? I never even got to ask 6. My wife is a CNA in a nursing home. She had a resident who was formerly a delivery nurse in the 70s and 80s. When she was on her last few breaths, my wife was leaning into her face to clean it, and she whispered in my wife's ear. When I was a nurse, I switched babies around. I'm not sure what's worse, knowing that one child may not be your child, or that this woman could have done it many times. My grandpa, a Sicilian man with blessed cooking skills, told us on his deathbed that his meatballs were actually frozen meatballs from the grocery store. Ate one of my great uncles, someone I barely knew I could count on one hand how many times we actually crossed paths, but on his deathbed he asked for me. The only thing he said to me was that he was sorry. I won't pretend that his passing hit me hard, but those words have stuck with me over the years. Why would he apologize to a 13-year-old who was practically a stranger? My mom says he was likely sorry for not being there for me, but I don't know why he'd feel that way. No one ever expected him to make time for his great-nephew. My grandfather on his deathbed leaned over and with all his remaining energy told me that he was in fact the person who let the dogs out. All my grandpa said on his deathbed was, can someone turn off that smell after I opened my breakfast burrito? The poor guy getting crop dusted on his deathbed with breakfast burrito farts. The worst kind of farts. A terrible way to go out 11, my grandpa murmured. I hid wealth in me, then nodded off.